Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to dive a little deeper into the world of Python programming by exploring data types. Now, just like different tools for building a house have different uses and purposes, data types in Python help us organize and work with different kinds of information. So let's get started with Python data types. So the first thing we need to do is we need to understand data types. In Python, there are several primary data types we use to represent different kinds of information. So let's explore the three common data types: numbers, text, and Boolean. So really quickly, let's work with some integers and some floating point numbers. So if we wanted to create a variable for regular whole numbers, we could just say num is equal to 15. You don't have to declare your variables in Python, so it becomes very easy. But in Python, it does know what the variable type is. So if you make a variable an integer, it will know that it's an integer. So when you work with it in the future, Python might run an error. So it's important for you to know what data type we're looking at. So if we wanted to work with a floating point number, we could do 3.15. Let's say we want to know what it is that we're working with, because we're having an error with the program. We will want to find out where something's going wrong. So what we could do is we could print out the type. And so what I'm doing is I'm using the print function and I'm passing in the type function. And so we could say, I want to know what the type is for num, and I want to know what the type is for my float. So let's go ahead and run our code, and we can see here that this is, in fact, it does identify it as an integer, and it does identify my float as a floating point number. Remembering this particular bit of information, the type, is going to be very useful as you're going forward in your programming career in Python, because sometimes you're going to have an issue where the integer or the float is wrong, and it needs to be something else to be accurate with your math. So I would keep this one in your toolbox because it is useful and it's very handy. I've used it many times, especially going through school. This one was very important. So the second data type that we're going to talk about is strings. So text in Python is represented by the data type called string. Strings are enclosed in single quotes or double quotes. Let's take a look at a couple of examples to understand this one a little bit better. So our first example is double quote, hello, comma, world, exclamation point, double quote. So if we look at this and we run it in the system, we're going to see that it prints out hello, comma, world, exclamation point. No problems. But if we come down here to this one, Python is fun, in single quotes, it does the same thing. It prints it out, no problem. But when we come down here to I'm learning coding, we see that there's double quote, and then there is the contraction I'm learning coding, period, and then double quotes again. Now, if we didn't do double quotes in this particular string, then it would recognize that single quote as the end of the string. So if it looked like single quote, I, single quote, that's the end of the string. And that's how Python recognizes that particular string of text has ended. So this is an important element of working with strings to keep in mind, because I personally will write single quotes for my strings. I like it. I think it looks better. But if I'm going to write something that has a contraction in it, for example, or if I'm going to use possession, like this is the dog's bowl, where it's going to, say apostrophe S to show possession, I'm going to need those double quotes so I can do that. Now, there is another way to get by this. So really quickly, what we're going to do is we're going to come back over here. We're going to get rid of this because we don't need these anymore. And we're going to say, we're going to do a string, and we're going to say print, and we're going to say the dog's food. Oh, see, it keeps doing that, and that's a problem. So one of the things that we're going to need to do in order to tell Python that we wanted that, we want that apostrophe S in it, we have single quotes. If we run this, the dog's food, and it'll allow that. So this is basically telling it, hey, this is a character outside of this command structure. This is going to be an actual apostrophe, right? So the other way to do this is to put in double quotes if you like, but I'm going to show you what's going to happen. If I do it with double quotes, it's still going to show it the same way. There's no problem. But when I do double quotes, I can use it without it. I can say the dog's food, and I can have that single quote just hanging out in there. Now, this is all up to you. It's going to change based on your needs, but it's really important to understand this is going to happen, because if you use single quotes here, that's going to change the way that Python understands what you're trying to tell it. So I generally write with single quotes. This is how I like to do it. I think they look cleaner, and so I like that. So for me, I have to come in here and I have to do that. So the third data type that we're going to discuss today is the Boolean. Boolean data types represent truth values, either true or false. Booleans are often used in decision-making and control structures. So here's some examples. So really quickly, let's take a look at a couple of examples of Boolean. And for this, I'm going to utilize my blog, and we're going to go over the examples that I use there. So here we have the first block of code has 3 variables. The first one is a variable that has a value of 5, and the second one has a value. The second one is y, and it has a value of 10. Stop going over there, so it won't pop that up. All right, so then we have another one that's is greater, and is greater is equal to x is greater than y. And so what's going to happen is that variable is going to say if x is greater than y, it'll be true or false, or is equal to x is equal to y. So it's going to run a check on is x equal to y, and it's going to determine if it's true or false. So if we run the code, we can see that is x greater than y, and the answer is false. X is 5 and y is 10, so it's not greater. And is x equal to y, and the answer is false. So we're going to see false again because x and y are not equal. Now, if we were to change this around and we were to say, all right, is y greater than x, and we were to run the code again, we would see that now it's showing true. So, and as we've done before, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to pass the type function. And then I'm going to pass in the variables that we're looking for, the same ones that we have up here. So is greater and is equal. So is greater, and let's not type the whole thing out. And is equal to. And now we're going to run the code again, and we're going to show that Python did recognize them as Boolean, and it's showing us here that it is. So we don't have to declare them, but Python recognizes them automatically. So I hope that clarifies a little bit more about what a Boolean is. It's true or false. We're going to cover this a little bit more in more depth in the future, but for now, just getting a beginner's basic understanding of different concepts of Python programming, and hopefully that's understandable. All right, everybody, that is everything for this video. Just to recap, we've covered data types in Python. We learned about numbers, text, which are strings, and Booleans. We learned how to use a couple of functions, the type function, to identify what a variable's type is. In the next post, we're going to cover loops, which are super important to your beginner Python coding journey. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.